The chipped mug warmed my hands, the lukewarm coffee doing little to thaw the icy knot in my chest. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, mirroring the storm raging within me. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since I found the text. 3 weeks of carefully constructed normalcy shattering into a million jagged pieces. 3 weeks of playing the role of a husband who knew nothing, while every fiber of my being screamed with the knowledge of her betrayal. Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I thought I knew better than myself, had been having an affair, not some fleeting, drunken indiscretion. This was deliberate. A carefully crafted, clandestine relationship with a man named David, a co-worker she had once claimed to barely know. I had seen the proof, the suggestive messages, the secret lunch dates, the sickeningly intimate pet names, each one a fresh wound, a constant reminder of her deception. I had spent the first few days in a daze, the world tilting on its axis. I walked through the house, its familiar spaces suddenly alien, haunted by the phantom of her laughter, by echoes of promises now rendered hollow. The anger had come slowly, a simmering rage that threatened to boil over at any moment. I had wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand answers, but something held me back. Perhaps it was the lingering vestiges of love, or maybe it was a perverse desire to see how long she could keep up this charade. So I played the part of the oblivious husband. I asked about her day, listened to her fabricated stories, even managed a weak smile when she recounted a particularly bland office lunch. The effort it took to maintain that facade was exhausting, but it gave me something, a sense of control. I watched her, studied her, noted the subtle shifts in her behavior, the lingering looks at her phone, the nervous fidgeting, the forced intimacy. I felt like a predator observing its prey, and that knowledge gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. This morning, she had been particularly brazen. She had spent the entire weekend with him under the guise of a work conference, returning home late Sunday night with a carefully constructed story about late-night networking and early morning presentations. As we sat across from each other at the breakfast table, I asked how the conference had gone. Her eyes didn't meet mine. "Oh, it was fine," she replied, her voice a tad too casual. "Pretty standard." Then a smirk, a subtle, arrogant twist of her lips that sent a chill down my spine. "You know, sometimes I think you worry too much," she said, her voice laced with mocking sweetness. "You're not in charge, you know." The words hung in the air, heavy, insulting. They weren't just about my supposed worry. They were about power, about control. They were confirmation of everything I already knew. She saw me as a fool, someone to be manipulated, to be controlled. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The anger that had simmered for weeks finally boiled over. But instead of an explosion, it solidified, cold and sharp like steel. I pushed back my chair. The scraping sound echoed through the silent kitchen. She looked up, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "You're right, Sarah," I said, my voice low and even. "I'm not in charge." Then I stood and walked to the bedroom, the rhythmic drumming of rain against the window pane the only sound accompanying me. I pulled her suitcase from the top of the closet and began to pack, methodically, folding her clothes, her shoes, her toiletries. Each item I touched seemed to scream with her duplicity. The red dress she wore on our anniversary, the expensive perfume I had bought her for Christmas, the worn t-shirt she loved to sleep in, once tokens of love, now mocking reminders of her infidelity. She appeared in the doorway, watching me, her eyes wide with mixture of fear and disbelief. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm packing your bags," I replied, my gaze unflinching. "Are you serious?" A hint of panic crept into her voice. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious, Sarah," I said calmly, continuing to pack. "You said I'm not in charge, and you're right. I'm not going to try to control you or your actions, but I can control who lives in my home." She tried to reason with me, to apologize, to deny everything. I didn't listen. Every word she uttered sounded false, hollow, dripping with the same deceit she had been feeding me for weeks. It was too late for apologies. The trust, the love, everything had been irrevocably broken. When the suitcase was full, I zipped it shut. The sound was a final declaration. I walked past her, carrying the heavy bag, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She followed me, her voice rising. Desperate now. "Where do you think you're going?" she shrieked, blocking the front door, her face contorted with anger. "You can't just kick me out." I didn't respond. I simply opened the door, placed the suitcase on the porch, and stepped back inside. Her jaw dropped as I reached for the handle. "I can, and I just did." I met her gaze. No rage, no regret, just pure, resolute finality. "You may not be under my control, Sarah, but your living here is." Then I closed the door. The lock clicked into place with a satisfying finality. I turned slowly, walking back into the living room. The silence was deafening. The house felt empty, but also lighter. I didn't feel sadness. No more anger, just a strange sense of calm. A feeling of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The betrayal was still there, a raw wound, but it no longer consumed me. It had been painful, but it had also finally given me back the control I had been longing to regain. I walked to the window, watching her through the glass. The rain had stopped. A weak ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. She stood there on my porch, staring at the door, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. At her feet, the suitcase lay still, a stark symbol of her expulsion. I felt no pity, no guilt, just free. I could rebuild. I could heal. I could find someone who would love me honestly. As she finally turned and walked away, disappearing down the street, I made myself a fresh cup of coffee. It tasted so much better this time.